Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this Zero Waste video series segment on municipal organics programs. My name is Mikey Strawhall with Waste Free Advocates. This Zero Waste video series segment is organized by Waste Free Advocates, formerly Recycling Advocates, an Oregon-based nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering and connecting Oregon communities to minimize overconsumption and waste. We are very excited to be speaking with Freddy Coronado, a resident zero waste specialist of San Francisco's Department of the Environment. Hi, Freddy. How are you today?
Good. Excited to meet you and to talk about zero waste.
Awesome. Awesome. Can you please tell our audience today how you got into working with Organixx?
Sure. So let's see. I graduated from San Francisco State University here in San Francisco back in 2014. And on my last semester of college, I took an internship here at the San Francisco Department of the Environment. So during that internship, I was helping our zero waste team do business outreach in regard to the checkout bag ordinance, which is the ban on single-use plastic bags and the charge. And during that time, we were also working on the styrofoam ban on foodware. So ban on styrofoam foodware, yeah. Immediately I had a lot of interest in zero waste, especially collection programs and how to make it like accessible citywide. So I definitely learned a lot from, the folks that I was interning with. And so, I graduated with a degree in geography. And upon my graduation, I started working with Recology San Francisco. So they're our hauler for the city. And I worked there for 3 years. And so yeah, that's, I was doing tour educational programs at the San Francisco transfer station and educating mostly students and visitors on the zero waste programs of the city.
Cool. Awesome. I love Recology. They're up here in Oregon now, finally. So, and how long would you say you've been working with Organixx?
So you can say that it's 7 years. So this is going to be my 7th year working with Organixx, again, mostly implementing and improving composting programs in the multifamily sector.
And how long has San Francisco's Department of Environment Organixx program been running for?
Yeah, so that's a great question. This year is actually our 25-year anniversary. Awesome. Of a composting program in the city. So we really are proud of that program. And, we're known around the world for being pioneers in composting collection for a city of this size. I think it's been a pretty successful program. So, yeah.
And can you give us a brief overview of the Organixx program within San Francisco for our audience outside of San Fran?
Sure. So you can say that recycling and composting are mandatory in San Francisco. So everyone has to comply with the mandate. So that includes businesses, single-family homes, schools, churches, of course, our apartments, condos. So everyone has to participate in the composting program. So, there isn't one sector that we don't work with. So we work with everyone and we do compliance-based work across all sectors. Recology is the only hauler permitted to haul composting in San Francisco. So they collect and process all the organic material coming out of the compost stream, and currently goes to Blossom Valley Organics Farm is in the Central Valley of California. So Recology goes there, it takes roughly 60 to 90 days for, what we collect in the green bins to come back as finished product. And that finished product is sold to mostly vineyards and no-till agriculture sector in Northern California. So there's definitely a lot of value in it and a lot of demand for it. And we just need to generate more.
That's awesome. Can you give us a sense of scope of the operation, including households served, people employed, and the amount of materials handled?
Yeah, so gosh, let's see. So number of households sold. If you really want, I can dig around and look for that right now. But I don't have that exact number.
Okay.
At least for the residential sector, I know that we work with 8,000 apartment buildings.
Okay, perfect.
And roughly 100, maybe around 100,000, 125,000 single family homes.
That's huge.
And yeah, and I might not giving you the right quote on this one, but I think it's roughly 66,000 2 to 5 unit buildings as well.
Wow. Do you know how many people are employed within San Francisco's Department of the Environment that works with recology, as well as like how many recology staff work to manage the materials?
So I'm not sure on the numbers from recology.
Okay.
Although I know that they have, lots of employees from collection to processing to a whole, they call it a waste zero specialist. So the waste zero specialists work on readjusting services, providing outreach materials, collateral. I know that team at recology is roughly between 8 to 10 people. And our team, we have a staff of 12 in the zero waste team here at the Department of the Environment. And within those 12, 3 of us work in the residential sector. So it's my supervisor, myself, and an associate that basically do all the compliance work for the residential sector. So that's single family, apartments, and your large generators like condos and whatnot. And we also do have an outreach team. So it's called Environment Now. It's a training program for people that are trying to get a foot into the environmental field. So the Environment Now outreach team helps a lot with our outreach campaigns, whether it's doing tabling at events or working, doing recycling, composting, door-to-door outreach at apartment buildings.
Cool. And if you can you give us an estimate of materials handled within the Organixx program on like a daily, weekly, or monthly basis?
Yeah, so prior to COVID, we were generating roughly 700 tons of compost per day.
Wow.
And after COVID, so currently we're around 500 tons per day. So we do collect definitely a lot of material, and that's definitely the stream that we collect the most after construction demolition, you can say. So, compost is really heavy. So that does the amount of tons. And where did I have this? I think maybe, once you take once it's processed, it's maybe roughly like 250 to 300 tons of finished product per day.
Wow, that's a lot. That's really cool though. And regarding COVID, has COVID brought in a lot of like restrictions to still being able to accept like Organixx from businesses and
not at all. So we continued with our composting programs and our recycling program. Nothing stopped. We did have, especially from the commercial sector, we did have a lot of businesses that minimize or pause their service. So from restaurants or of course from like office towers and whatnot, we definitely saw a reduction in compostables from those type of accounts. But in the residential sector, it did not pause. In fact, it probably increased because everyone's working from home.
Right.
But San Francisco is a commuter city, so that's why we saw, that reduction in compost being collected, because at any point, even though we have like 150,000 residents in the city, before COVID, we had maybe up to 1,500,000 people in the city, like either working or visiting.
Right on. What would you say have been some of the biggest barriers to deal with collecting organics on a large scale, like what San Francisco is doing?
Well, this is a city that's really hilly, so I would say the geography, it's somewhat of a challenge to, imagine having to roll 3 bins out to a really steep hill. But that definitely has not stopped us on even the steepest of the hills have, all the 3 bins. Old housing stock has been a challenge as well. So, our smaller, older buildings in Chinatown, for example, they weren't built to have 3 bins in their hallways or in the basement or whatnot. So older buildings do pose a challenge, but we still service them as long as they fit the bins. And we do have the ability to assess. I'm turning off notifications here. We do have the ability to assess. If someone claims to not have space, then we can grant them, a waiver for not participating. Another challenge, and probably the biggest challenge in them, is the lack of participation from residents. So, we can have properties have recycling, composting, and the property managers are doing everything they can, but ultimately it falls on the residents to participate. So if residents don't participate, then we're not collecting, compost, or it's ending up in the landfill stream.
And how do you deal with non-participation? Do you guys have incentives or education programs that help educate the residents so that they're more willing to participate and understand how to actually do the program?
So the biggest incentive is monetary. So because we have a pay-as-you-throw system, the more you generate, the more you're likely to pay, but also everyone that recycles and composts gets a recovery discount on their refuse bill.
Cool.
So that's an incentive to recycle and to compost. So even though it's mandatory, you are getting a saving simply by having, the green and the blue bins. So the more you recycle, the more you compost, the higher your recovery discount is. Now, when say a property is choosing not to comply, and this has maybe not worked with the residents, we do have the ability through their bills to issue a contamination charge on either contaminated bin. So a contamination charge can be anywhere from 25 to 100% extra on whatever contaminated stream it is.
And could you give us or provide a percentage on how residents are doing? Like 70% are actually doing really good compared to like 30%?
Sure. So in terms of service compliance, and this is for the residential sector. So in terms of accounts having the 3 bins, we are a little bit over 95, maybe between 95 to 98% service compliance. So
wow, that's awesome.
Mostly everyone has the 3 bins. That doesn't mean that everyone's using them, But at least everyone, right? The first step in this program is to make sure that everyone has access and that everyone has the bins. So we have a pretty high percentage rate on service, and so that's as much as we know. And then, other than that, we do have like abilities to track on who sets out bins, who doesn't, and issue like audits or inspections from there to get those accounts into compliance. So my focus mostly is targeting larger buildings, right? Because that's where you're gonna get the most material. So focusing on apartments for us is buildings that are 16 units and above. So that's mostly who we work with. I'm not sure, can I continue going?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, go ahead. We'll touch base on it later on as well, but please, by all means.
Okay, so in 2019, we passed the Refuse Separation Compliance Ordinance, so called RSO for short. And the Refuse Separation Compliance Ordinance targets large refuse generators. So a large refuse generator in San Francisco is an account that generates more than 40 cubic yards of refuse per week, or has a roll-off compactor. So the reason why this ordinance impacts these generators is because they are responsible for roughly 20% of the total refuse collected from the city. So we have 500 accounts, so 500 big buildings that are responsible for 20% of the refuse. Oh, so I didn't explain what this ordinance is. So basically the ordinance states that if these accounts will be audited every 2 years, and if they fail an audit, they have to hire what we call a zero waste facilitator. So a zero waste facilitator is a company that can provide back of the house sorting services for these buildings, or also do like educational campaigns in order to get these large buildings to properly sort.
Okay. And kind of going back, we'll touch more on multifamily housing units in a minute, but what would you say within the overall Organixx program, some of the biggest successes have been?
We don't own or operate a landfill. So that's a huge success. Definitely has reduced costs in having to send material to the landfill that we don't own or operate. And also just knowing that we're helping the agricultural sector by, providing a good quality composting finished product that they can then apply to their, in this case, vineyards for the most part. So that's a really great circular system that we've developed. It's not like recycling. It doesn't have to be shipped or hauled far away. It stays within the Bay Area. The most is, going to Central Valley, and it comes back and it goes into, vineyards here. So it's a pretty circular system with the composting.
Well, and you had mentioned access was 95% plus, and that's huge, right? You gotta start with having access to the program first before you can work on like compliance and understanding of the program. So after implementation of the program, I mean, you mentioned before the program's been going on for 25 years. So San Francisco and the Department of Environment have definitely been working diligently for a long time to make sure that the program can adapt and change so that it's working. What have been some of the biggest noticeable changes that have needed that San Francisco needed to make to get kind of to where they are right now?
Well, we always like to tell everyone, especially other cities that we work with, that making it mandatory was a crucial step. So everyone having to participate is key. Another one is providing outreach materials, constant education. So starting with children and school-age kids, like it's super important that, you know, we have zero waste education in our schools. And again, providing those incentives, right? So you're getting a recovery discount, or you're getting a discount if you participate in the recycling and composting programs.
And would you recommend another municipality that's trying to work on doing this or interested in this to start a program? What would you recommend they start with?
Yeah, I think having the input of the hauler that you're contracting with is key. You know, they're the ones that are going, unless it's a municipality-based collection program, the working relationship with the hauler is really important with whoever the collection, because they're the one, you know, this company is going to be the one that's going to be doing the collection for you, telling you who's not compliant or not. So there has to be a lot of communication between the collection and, you know, the municipality that's implementing this program.
And going back to the previous question and what you answered, you said that San Francisco made it mandatory. Did San Francisco have to lobby and pass a regulation to make it mandatory, or what was the process that the Department of Environment took to make that happen?
Yeah, sure. So I, you know, definitely I was not around when that was going on, but we had, you know, what's really great about our city is that we always had public support for environmental causes. So that's one of the reasons why, you know, we have a successful zero waste program, is because our residents care about environmental issues and they trust government, and they believe that, you know, zero waste is part of the, you know, the environmental equation. So when it passed, you know, we had strong support from our politicians, from our board of supervisors, and from our mayor. So, you know, Gavin Newsom at the time, who's now our governor, was the mayor who signed the mandatory recycling composting ordinance. So having not only the community support and trust, but also, you know, our elected representatives is key to having good programs.
Awesome. Does San Francisco's Department of the Environment, do they have shareable information for other municipalities looking to start programs specifically regarding organic programs that are shareable?
Absolutely. We work with so many municipalities, states, both in the state, nationally and internationally, to help them develop, or, you know, I think our forte is how to provide these programs across communities. So we always work with, you know, different cities that are willing to champion this as well.
That's awesome. And listeners, if anyone's interested in this, send us a message and we'll make sure that we can get you in touch with the right information or specific people that you'd like to talk to. So going into the main part of the segment within this series that we really wanted to touch base with is multifamily housing units, apartment complexes, condos, locations that tend to have obviously more than one family living within the buildings. So you already mentioned that San Francisco works with multifamily housing units. How did San Francisco go about starting to work with them? What were some of the biggest barriers that you faced? And after that, what would be some of the major successes that San Francisco was able to succeed in passing over those barriers?
Yeah, so when we rolled out the composting program, we rolled out, so rolling out means, starting a service with an account. So when we began this, we just informed all property managers and owners that they were going to get a composting bin in their properties, in their apartments. So we literally rolled in a composting bin, and that's how it started. Coupled it with a mailer to all the residents, probably a letter to all the property managers informing them of the change, and just braced ourselves for contamination and to continue, with that ongoing education that's key to having successful collection programs. So I wanted to, did that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
What did you want to share?
Oh yeah, so I wanted to share, so this ongoing campaigns to property managers and residents is something that we continue to do every couple of years. So we have our enforcement procedures, but the most important is that we have that constant reminders for our property managers and our residents that these are mandatory programs. So right now, I'm working on a campaign to mail a letter to all the property managers in the city. So here's just an example of a letter that we are currently sending to roughly 4,000 property managers in San Francisco, notifying them that, it's their responsibility to provide access to recycling composting bins to the residents. So paired with this letter, we're also sending a mailer to all the residents. So this is key. I don't know if you can see it, maybe.
Yeah, and audience, if you would like a copy of this, I'm sure that we could provide that as well.
Yeah.
That looks great. I love the graphics.
We sent a mailer. So we did this campaign a couple of years ago. We sent a mailer to every single apartment resident in San Francisco. And now we're sending it to every resident that lives in a 2 to 5 unit building.
Cool.
So it's a two targeted approach. So you are trying to empower and educate the property managers while also sending the collateral to the residents living in in these buildings.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we do have a property manager toolkit. And so our main goal is to redirect property managers to this toolkit where they can know, where to request assistance, where to get these signs that we have here, how to order kitchen pails for the residents. So we really try to provide like these resources in order to have successful programs.
And you talk about the education and communication being a huge part of having the success, to make sure that they know and understand how to use the system being provided for them and that they have access to. Did you have focus groups or do canvassing beforehand, or how did you get large property management companies to be involved in this? I mean, you already mentioned that you made it mandatory, so it forced everyone to have to be involved in it. But I'm sure that working with large apartment complexes, you had major issues with contamination and understanding. Do you have your information in multiple languages?
Yeah, so all of our collateral is in English, Spanish, and Chinese, since those are the most commonly spoken languages in San Francisco. So all of our collateral is in those two languages. And in terms of working with property managers, Recology has a great relationship and involvement with the San Francisco Apartment Association. So having these connections with, the apartment associations, with the builders association, I think is crucial, and having them part of the table, asking them, how can we improve, or just informing them of what our resources are. Yes, it's a mandatory ordinance, but we also are here to work with them.
Right. That's awesome.
Mhm.
And what would you say would be the main point in passing that regulation? Community involvement and support, and then political backing as well from local politicians. And would you also say like other government stakeholders, like besides for the Department of Environment, were there other government organizations that were involved?
Yeah. So our Department of Public Health is involved. Refuse collection is a public health issue as well if it's not collected. So they mostly focus on making sure that every building or property in San Francisco has waste collection. So they do inform us sometimes, like, hey, like there's this account that only has a trash can. Like this is a place where you should have recycling and composting. So we do have those channels of communications from our Department of Public Health, and also our Department of Public Works. They're the agency that kind of oversees mostly in terms of refuse, like making sure that our streets are clean and looking for overflow of bins. So we do work a lot with those two departments, and they're part of the equation too.
And so we have a strong audience of enthusiastic zero wasters. What would you say would you recommend to them to do, or what would they need to do in order to help support getting an organics program like San Francisco's in Oregon and mostly within the Portland metro area?
Yeah, I think the beauty of Oregon is that we know that it's a state where population has a lot of interest in taking care of the environment or being environmental stewards. So I think just putting pressure on elected officials that this is something that residents want. It's very, very important. So keep demanding it. Keep electing those people. Keep endorsing and electing those that are willing to champion programs like this.
Awesome.
It's really important. Yeah.
And you said San Francisco is at like 95% in terms of getting access to everyone. Are there any areas or industries within the Organics program that San Francisco Department of Environment doesn't work with? City sections, neighborhoods, and if so, what would be the barrier for working with that? Like, how would you see San Francisco moving forward to get to 100% access?
We really do have work with everyone. I can't say about the commercial sector. I know that every business, has to comply with this. But, when looking just everywhere in the US or state programs, for example, like the residential sector is definitely one that is one of the ones that are left behind, mostly the multifamily sector. But we have worked with all of our apartment buildings. I have worked with single room occupancy hotels, so SROs. I've worked with transitional housing and shelters for the unhoused. So we do try to work with everyone. There have been some instances where an account might not be, for whatever reason, they won't recycle, they won't compost. So there are some buildings, some properties where Recology pulled out the recycling and the composting service because it was no longer viable to have those programs. However, we are reviving back those recycling composting programs. at those properties. So in addition to that, our affordable housing sites, they do have some challenges and they need a little bit more handholding. So of course, we know that, these are community members that are burdened, and we have to do more and provide more resources to them just because, of the type of our community members that we're working. So there are a couple affordable housing sites that I'm currently working with where, they're still lacking the right types of collection programs. So that is definitely an area that I see we could do more improvement just in general, right? Like, how do we make our programs more equitable and make sure that, these properties are getting the right type of attention from our city.
And you were mentioning earlier that you had like zero waste advisors, right, for certain sections. Correct me if I'm wrong, but was that specifically for multifamily housing units because they kind of need a little bit more handholding and more assistance with education, understanding of the program? How does that work? If you know about like what their process is going forward with working with these companies or these accounts?
Yeah, so San Francisco has, I think you're referring to our affordable housing sites, perhaps?
Okay.
Or, so yeah, we have roughly 400 multifamily accounts that have been identified as affordable housing sites by our Mayor's Office of Housing. So, so we do have an environmental justice team. So it's a 2-person team that I work with to make sure that we provide the adequate service and attention to these 400 properties, because they are, some of these sites are pretty large. They can have between 100 to 500 units each. And because of the inequity in our city, we're a city that has a really big income gap. It's important that's why we have this environmental justice team that can focus solely in improving and providing those resources for those type of properties. And so for assisting the property managers, helping them navigate, the complexities sometimes of a recology bill, or how to read how to readjust recycling or composting in order to see a saving. And above all, like helping them with educational and outreach campaigns for their residents.
And would you say that that's made a significant increase in compliance with reducing contamination and understanding of the program?
Absolutely. I think that a lot of the times cities, focus, or they choose to start with higher income neighborhoods or zip codes because they know that there are educated residents there and it'll be easier to roll out a program. I'm not going to say that that's, true. But I think there's a lot of value in working with these, with our more marginalized communities, low-income housing and whatnot. So when working with these properties, there's not only are we helping with addressing the inequities in our country or our city, but we're also working with more people. There's more people that are living in affordable housing sites than say in a wealthy neighborhood where there's only 1 or 2 or 3 people per household. So, we do target these properties because we know that there's a lot of material to also recover from these properties.
Awesome. So Freddie, what about compostable plastics? Does San Francisco and the Department of Environment work with companies that sell compostable plastics? Does this go into the Organixx program or does this get landfilled?
Yeah, so our composting programs do accept certified compostable plastics. They have to be BPI certified. So we were one of the first cities in the country to accept compostable plastics. So our foodware from our restaurants are either has to be recyclable, reusable, or certified compostable. So we do definitely accept that. And what's been really crucial in the multifamily sector is the ability for residents to use certified compostable bags. So we actually encourage property managers to provide compostable bags to the residents, especially property managers that are managing affordable housing sites. So we have worked with different compostable bag suppliers to have compostable bag dispensers in some high rises. So we are huge advocates of compostable bags, especially if a building has chutes.
Right.
Imagine having to go 30 stories down with a bag. So they need something to put it in when you live in an apartment or a high rise. So unfortunately, like compostable bags are, I know that, they're not creating that good quality compost, but it's a huge resource for participation. So properties
Making it feasible.
Yeah. So properties where we have installed the compostable bag dispensers, we've seen an increase in participation because it's becoming more convenient. And we've seen a reduction in contamination because they have the right type of bag. So otherwise, you'll see plastic bags, residents using them. So we're huge advocates for compostable bags in the multifamily sector.
That's cool. Is there anything else that you would recommend or like to touch on regarding Organixx programs and working with multifamily housing units?
Well, I think it's really important that we work with everyone, especially within our residential sector. For any city that's growing, I think the Pacific Northwest, our cities are definitely becoming more dense. We're gonna have more people living in these type of properties. So, we see it here, Portland, Seattle, LA, San Francisco, we're getting more high rises. And I think density is a good thing. As long as we have good sustainable cities, I think density is good. So we're gonna have more people living in this type of housing. So it's important that we devote the resources to the residents that live in these type of properties, and to not just put it into the back burner. And with COVID and the pandemic, I think more and more people are gonna be working from home. So a lot of that waste that was probably going in the commercial sector from these large offices is probably now staying in the in the residential sector.
Well, especially with ordering out and having everything to go, dealing with COVID policies and not being able to eat in. I mean, that's been a huge issue.
Yeah. So we have more higher density multifamily being built to accommodate our population needs, and we have more people working from home.
Well, Freddie, thank you so much. This has been really enlightening and inspirational. And hopefully this will help push Oregon residents and politicians to start a program similar to San Francisco's Department of Environment. On behalf of Waste-Free Advocates, thank you, Freddy Coronado. Huge shout out to San Francisco's Department of the Environment for joining us for this Zero Waste video series segment. We hope today's segment will inspire you to take action today and every day to reduce consumption and waste. We need you. A low consumption and low waste lifestyle is for everybody. Working together and doing our part will have lasting positive impacts on the planet and livability. Please follow, like, and share and subscribe to Waste Free Advocates, previously Recycling Advocates, to receive notifications of our events and future episodes of the Zero Waste series that you won't want to miss. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time, remember, a future without waste, circularity starts with us. Thank you again, Freddie.
Thank you,
We'll be in touch. Have a
Mikey.
great day.
Bye, everyone.